Welcome. I'm Chuck Van Anden, and I have the great joy of having a conversation here with Marilyn Haskel. We all know her, and hopefully we'll find out some things we didn't know or we're curious about. So we're going to have a little chat, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask her questions that she might answer or not. But it's a pleasure to be here amongst all of you, see a nice full room and eager faces. So, Marilyn.
Chuck.
We know you lots of ways as a choir leader, a pianist, an organist, saxophone.
Yeah, tenor sax, whoa.
So I'm going to ask you about music in a few minutes, but what else do you think people would like to hear about your interest or your doings?
You mean in terms of instruments?
No, outside of music.
Oh, in terms of music. Well, let's see. I could say something like, I came tonight and said, I'm really glad I don't have to play the organ. And that's not because I dislike playing the organ, but it just makes me very nervous. I'm much more unnervous standing in front of the choir. So
That's your comfort level.
that's my comfort level, yes. Yeah.
Can everybody hear here?
Mm-hmm.
Way back?
Yes, I believe you can hear me back there, yes?
Yes.
I'm getting nods.
Sort of.
Sort of. Okay, I'll be as loud as I can. I am very good at projecting my voice. How's that? It comes from years of teaching junior high school.
So, teaching junior high school and leading a chorus of aging people, which is the bigger challenge? Neither hear you.
No, well, the interesting thing is, the junior high chorus that I had by myself on the stage in the auditorium with 200 sixth graders. I don't ever want to repeat that. 60 seniors are much better.
And not just by a factor of 10 or
That's
whatever.
right. That's right. That's right.
Exponentially.
You told me when we met before this that you started because your sister started playing piano. You took piano lessons at what age?
Well, my sister was 6 years older. She started piano at 11 and I was 5. And so she came home. Many of you will recognize this book, Teaching Little Fingers to Play.
Yes.
Yes. She brought her book home and she played, Here we go up a row to a birthday party. And the second one was, Dolly dear, Sandman's here, you will soon be sleeping. Yeah, okay, you know that. So she came home and played that on the piano, and I got up onto the piano bench and listened and played them back. And my mother at that point said, oh, I guess you should have lessons too. Which, to some way of thinking, I'm not really happy about because I was learning to play by ear. And what happened when I started taking piano lessons was to learn to read, which is not a bad thing, but I lost my ability to play only by ear or to play and by ear.
Right.
So I have always felt handicapped, and I'm terribly, terribly jealous of jazz musicians. Seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
Just playing by ear.
Yeah. And improvising. You know, when you sit at the organ and you don't know how to improvise, everyone knows when you begin to improvise.
Well, you're better than my grandmother. My grandmother was a very accomplished pianist. And she used to play the church organ. And playing the organ, she found confounding. And so her pace and rhythm of playing the hymns was a little slow. So when you started on piano. When did you take up the organ? Not till much later, right?
That's true. I didn't take up organ until college. And it's interesting because growing up in West Virginia, there weren't a lot of musicians loose. And well, they probably were loose, but nevertheless, they were not in abundance, shall we say. There was one woman in town who played the piano, and when I got ready to audition to go to college as a music major, I was playing clarinet in the band. So I said, well, I haven't had piano lessons since the 8th grade. So maybe I should audition on clarinet. So I found a piece to play, and she came with me and accompanied me, and I got to college and to the audition, and I played my piece up on the stage looking at this row of faculty, and they said, well, so what do you intend to major in? And I said, organ. And they said, well, can you play the piano? I said, of course I can play the piano. I've played in church since I was 12. Well, they put a hymnal in front of me and picked a hymn and said, play this, and I did. And they did that 2 or 3 times, and they decided that I might manage to get through school.
But not as a clarinetist.
Not as a clarinet. I don't think I ever played clarinet after that.
So you played in church from a young age.
Yeah, it started out in Sunday school. My mother was a Sunday school superintendent in the Methodist Church, and I was pressed into service to play during whatever we had to sing that morning. And so I did that for a long time, and then I sang in the choir, and I did not play while I was in high school because there was someone else to do that. But I did start playing at 12 in the elementary school, Sunday school.
So your mother really encouraged you to be musical, to play.
Oh, my mother always wanted to play the piano. And so that got passed on to me. When she was a student, a naive student, she very much wanted a piano, and the family couldn't afford it. So there was a boy in her church, not in her church, in the school, who said to her, I have a Jew's harp. And my mother had a Jew's harp, and he said, I have a piano, I'll trade you a piano for that Jew's harp. And my mother said, and she gave him her Jew's harp. Well, of course, the piano never showed up. But that's how much she wanted to play the piano, and so she was determined that my sister and I have piano lessons, which we both did.
Did your sister continue playing?
She studied while she was in high school or college, but she became an early childhood teacher, and so she learned piano further and was playing Beethoven and all kinds of good stuff, but that was not her area.
Your mom, as I recall you telling me, was really committed to you going to college.
Oh, yeah. She had said to my father, my girls are going to go to college, My mother had 2 years of college, which was all you needed to become a teacher in West Virginia. My dad said, who was a mechanic, we can't afford it. And she said, yes, we can. And we will do it, and they will go to college. And we did. Of course, those were the days when you could go to college for a reasonable amount of money. I did not come out of college with a debt the way students do today. I did have some debt, but I could pay it off myself in the first 3 years of working. So that was an incredible advantage.
Your first 3 years of working, what did you do?
For my sins, I taught junior high school in Rowayton Middle School in Connecticut.
Rowayton.
And I taught 1 year there, fell madly in love, and went to Massachusetts and taught 6 more years in a public school, again, junior high. And then I said to myself, I have to do something different. And that's when I decided that my career really was in the church. So, see what junior high does to you.
So going to church was running away from junior high, or you had strong influences through your developmental years?
No, you know, I tell people that my family were religion hobbyists. Because, you know what I mean. You went to everything that happened in the church. And in the little town where I grew up, 1,600 people, there were 2 Methodist churches. The Methodist Protestant Church and the Methodist Episcopal Church. And they did not much like each other. And in the mornings on Sunday, we would go to Sunday school at the Methodist Protestant Church. And then we would drive 2 miles to the Methodist Episcopal Church on the other side of town and go to preaching. The preacher there would preach the same sermon at the Methodist Protestant Church that evening. We went to that also. I am serious. We did this week in and week out. And so, yeah, I was sort of ensconced in church all my life. You're speechless.
I'm still grappling with, on one level I really understand, but on another level, going from teaching junior high kids to saying, gee, my calling is to be employed in the church. That's a big change.
Yes, it was a big change, but when you play the organ, there aren't very many organists, especially in small churches. And so see, when you're a music major, you have to major in an instrument, even if you're a music education major. And my instrument was organ, which was a good idea because you have a means of income when you can't do anything else. You can at least put food on the table. And so I was a church musician the whole time after I got out of college. I always had a church job. I taught school and had a church job. And so it wasn't a stretch for me to go into working for the church. Naive as I was, I thought I could make a living at it. And seriously, I was sure I could figure out how to do it. And that lasted until I was about 35. And at that point I said, I have to get a full-time job if I'm going to keep working in the church. Because I played cocktail piano, I accompanied people in their choruses. I did everything I could do to make a living. But church was the core.
What's the joy you get out of that?
Well, I told the singers this the other day that sang for Roanne's funeral. I said, after we rehearsed the hymns that we were going to sing, I said, I love the sound of a congregational singing well. And if you're going to go into church work and you don't love the sound of a congregation, don't go into it. And you know, a lot of people go into it because they want to conduct a choir. They want to have a children's choir that, you know, can sing the 4A Requiem or something. I don't know. And it's true. Or they go into it and they want to perform on the organ, which is all wonderful, and travel all over the world and concertize. But if you don't love congregational singing, you shouldn't be there.
So how much influence do you think you had on helping congregations sing better?
Oh.
Yes.
They wish I had less, but no, I'll tell you, the real turning point for me came, gosh, I was well into my late 40s, with an organization called Music That Makes Community. And their whole premise was, we need to return to the basic skills that people have always used to sing. So if I sang, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, okay, call and response. Actually, what you just did is an echo. A response would be somewhat different. I would sing maybe a question, and you would have a response like, yes, Lord, or something like that.
And also with you.
And also with you.
Or amen.
The Lord be with you. And also with you. That's it. Okay. That's call and response. So I got involved in that group, and we learned how to teach people to do that in churches. Now that's different from opening a hymnal, playing an organ, and have everybody sing. But that action of having people hear their own voice in a room that is happy for them to sing in makes such a difference when they open the hymnal. It's very influential. So that changed my whole thinking about what congregations do and how well they do it. And that came very late in my life.
40s was late in your life?
Well, late in my career. Yeah, but no, I had been the traditional choir director, children's choirs, handbell choirs, all of that thing. And this, though, changed the direction of what I wanted to do in the church. And because of that, I got my final job, which was at Trinity Wall Street in New York. And I was working mostly in St. Paul's Chapel across from the World Trade Center. And we had, on Sunday morning, we never knew who was going to show up because there was a small group of people who came from the surrounding well, they weren't neighborhoods at that point right after 9/11. But a few people came, but a tour bus would pull up outside and 150 people might come in. And they came in for the service. They probably weren't, in this case, Episcopalians. We didn't even know if they were Christian. Didn't matter. The thing is, they were there, and they were to participate in worship, and we had to figure out how. So you can't hand somebody from Ethiopia a hymnal and expect them to sing. but they know how to do call and response. And so that's what we did there, a lot. And we sang in four-part harmony because it's the kind of music that people hear. The music inspires you to sing in the harmony. Those of you who are singers know how that happens. You hear it, and so you sing it. It's gratifying to hear a congregation sing that, but it's gratifying to watch a congregation notice their voices and then to use them in what they do to praise God, to pray, to engage each other. I was really privileged to have that as my last appointment in New York.
Wow. So, it reminds me, when we talked before coming here and we decided to call this session Preaching from the Choir,
To the choir.
to the choir, it gives me, though, what you just described is the preaching or the real use of music to engage people in a really fundamental way in a deep worship piece. It's not just we're singing.
And it's not just we're listening to a sermon.
Right.
Or we're listening to scripture. The phrase preaching to the choir, the reason I lifted it was that it came from a book that I asked someone to write while I was at church publishing. I was the marketing director and then I was the music editor for a while. And some of you may have heard of Vicki Sirota, who is an Episcopal priest. Her husband, Robert Sirota, was a musician who taught in one of the conservatories in New York. Anyway, the thing is that she had this approach, and I asked her to write a book, and we titled it Preaching to the Choir. And it's just what you said, that what people take home with them is not only what comes from the pulpit, from the scripture, but from what they sing with their mouths. When the hymnal back in, God knows, 1982 was being put together, someone said, this is the book, the congregation's book of theology. That's how people in the pew learn to interpret what they're hearing in other places in the church, because it's put into a poetic form and it's set to music, which goes into the brain and stays there. Many of you will know that when you visit your friends in the arbor, you may find that if you sing with them, they will remember the hymns, the old hymns. They'll remember them. Probably very specific ones. And no matter what your level of dementia is, that doesn't go away. So it has an impact. It's like the Lord's Prayer. Same thing.
Maybe we should sing the Lord's Prayer.
There are lots of people sing the Lord's Prayer, and there are lots of versions to the Lord's Prayer. I have several myself.
Speaking of which, at some point, you started writing music.
I did, and that was when I was working in New York, because this congregation, or lack of congregation, except whoever showed up, we needed music that you don't find in a hymnal. And also, we needed texts that were more I don't want to say contemporary because you're going to think, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what has happened since 1982 theologically and how we believe what we believe since then. Lots has changed, and you know, as wonderful as the hymnal 1982 is, don't tell anybody I said this. It lacks some things because it's out of use. It's time for a revision. In any case, so I had to write music that had something to do, words that had something to do with what we were preaching about and teaching about on Sunday morning, that I couldn't find a hymn that said that. And so, you know, let's see, I moved to New York when I was 50, so about that time, or shortly thereafter, was when I began to compose.
And you found that to be, what? Fulfilling, challenging, all of those? Because it's different than playing.
Oh, yes. Well, it was, I don't just sit down and say, the muse must tell me. A lot of people think that musicians do that, and some of them do. But I work best if somebody says, or I say, I need a hymn that says this about this reading, or something like that. Now, I'm writing for Collington here because we need what are called gospel acclamations, which are an alleluia followed by a verse that has something to do with what you're about to hear in the gospel. And so I read the gospel, I say, okay, what's the key phrase? What is it trying to communicate? And I structure something, or I pick a phrase out of the psalmody or something that I can put in there, write the music to. So I write better when there's a need. I don't write well just to create a symphony. I've never written a symphony.
You don't sound like you want to.
No. No, well, I don't have the expertise, and I don't have the drive, and I don't have the need. Unless there are instrumentalists out there that want to play.
So you don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I have to write this?
No, I do not. I do not. It's hard work. You sit down at the keyboard and you have this thought in mind, or you have poetry that says what you want it to say, and you sing it, and then you write it.
So in your mom was a huge influence to you.
Yes.
When you think about others, who would you put in that group of people who sort of gave you the foundation, the support, the courage to move on, the courage to stop teaching teenagers and...
Well, I would have to say, generally, without naming specific names, I would have to say that my mentors have been several of the clergy I've worked with. One in particular who said, look, why are you going back to get your master's degree? What you do is you need to find who it is that knows what you want to know and go learn from them. Which sounded great, but a lot more work than I wanted to do. So anyway, I did go back and get my master's, but that man was a mentor. I have had friends along the way who have just been selfless in their support of what I do and helping me find my way. And, you know, there are several people I look up to. One is Alice Parker, who is a composer and conductor, choral conductor, who's in her late 90s. She may be very close to 100 and right now. And I studied very briefly with her composition, and she is the kindest and most level-headed musician I have come across in a long time. So there have been lots of people along the way who have been really careful of me and just good friends that nurture me daily.
So you were in New York, down on Wall Street, at, you know, a thriving, at least for a lot of ways, church, and you came here.
Yes. Yeah, I knew that I had to move to a facility because I didn't retire until I was 70. And I knew that I had to go to a facility where when I got to the point I could not function, somebody would make sure I was taken care of. The reason being that my mother and all of her siblings had dementia. So chances were that my sister and I would also have dementia. Fortunately for me, I can't remember some names or words sometimes. I'm not quite there yet, but my sister is in dementia. And so I said, I have to be in what I learned was a CCRC. I've lived all over the country, and there were places that were my favorites. And I thought about going to each one of those, and I looked for places. I started looking in the Episcopal Church and said, because I worked for the Episcopal Church, they owed me. So, I said, they surely have something I can use. And I looked at a lot of different places and simply did not find anything I wanted to go to. Having grown up in West Virginia, coming to Washington, D.C. was an event when I was a child. And we did it 2 or 3 times. And so I said to myself, okay, there's this one near D.C. I think what I'll do is find a bed and breakfast on the Hill, go for 3 or 4 days, renew my relationship with Washington, D.C., because I wanted to be near a city. I mean, you can't live in New York City and love it for the rest of your life unless you continue to live there, so you got to live in another city. So I said, city with public transportation. Okay. Episcopal facility, that's even better. I took the metro from somewhere in D.C. out to, not here, the other one.
Largo?
Not Largo.
No, New Carrollton.
New Carrollton, that one, that's it. See, I told you I'd forget. Then people from Collington picked me up, and I came here and I looked around and talked to people. I met Mary and Henry and Francis Kalarick, and I said, these people are great. And so that's how I got here. That's how I got here. So this was a good move on my part.
So how long did it take you to find your spot here leading the choir?
Well, when I came, there was a choir director here who was not well, and then there was an interim, I believe.
Yeah.
And Marion said to me, well, would you consider taking over the choir? And I said, I'm just retired. I want a year to myself. And she said, okay. So she's a hard bargain.
Did you get a full year?
I did get a full year, yeah. So, but it's wonderful for me because this is, what could be better to do what you love doing for as long as you can do it, you know.
And it makes such difference. I know secondhand from Beth, who's in your choir, plus everybody else who is. It makes a difference to them, but it makes a difference to the community.
Well, a community that supports that kind of activity in the way that Collington does, not only to provide music for us and space to do it, but also an audience that is so appreciative. You can't ask for a better situation.
Well, don't be too modest, because I think the same thing you talked about and how you use music within a congregation, you do that here for us.
I hope so.
Yeah,
That's why I do it.
you should know so.
No, you should know so. It is, you know, it's a joy for all of us. And having been ushers on a few times when, you know, you have a concert going on and having to turn people away all the time, is, you know, a testimony to what it means to people.
Well, that's the support. You know, coming from a state like West Virginia and a small church, and always working in small churches until 1980 something or other, and so forth. Being in a small place where 10 or 15 people show up for things, when I look out there at a group of almost 100 people who have just come to enjoy the evening, that's wonderful. So, you know, and seeing what else happens here musically. It's not just me, you know that. It's the AIRS program, it's the concert that Carol Kempsky leads, the, you know, and the Ivy Bar,
It's Peter.
and there are, you know, there are people who are leading folk singing groups, and I mean, gee, you would think this was a conservatory.
So, but music isn't the only thing that happened here for you. Other things happen in your life.
He's going to crawl under the organ. Yes, that was sort of the icing on the cake, I have to say. Yeah, for those that don't know, well, you all know.
Oh, but we want to know for you.
No, Dan and I were good friends because we lived next door to each other. And Gay, his wife, we were good friends and traded lots of fun and all sorts of things. But it was just a good fun, neighborly thing to have. When Gay died in 21, it was sad for all of us because she was such a wonderful artist. And many of you have never seen her work. Dan is working on the second book of her artwork now. And when we first got together, I said to him, gee, it's like having a third person in this house. Excuse me. And he acknowledged that was true. And I said, that's absolutely fine with me. And it has continued that way. And so, again, I never thought this would happen at this age. I was divorced in 1978. And so, to find what we call lovingly elderly love at this point in our lives is quite wonderful. Dan and Gay were married for 50 years, so he had lots of practice. And I have to say, he's really good at it.
We're not going to ask what all this it is.
Can I ask what the it is?
There are some things I will not answer. Plead the fifth.
fun here at Collington?
I think the one that probably is the strongest was being involved in drama. I've never been anywhere where there was drama other than how people treat each other. But
No drama in churches?
that's what I'm talking about. No, but to have an opportunity to work with other people who are doing the arts, and in this case, dramatic production and so forth. Tim Saban, as many of you know, who did the drama group here for many years before he and Jim moved, are good friends of mine. I talk to them every day, and they gave me the opportunity to be involved in these productions that were purely top of the mind creativity. And then to find out that I could act a little bit. So a couple of times I have been in things here where I have no way of assessing whether they were any good or not, but I had a great time. And so that continues. That was a new fun thing for me.
Yeah, I don't know if it was fun for me. You put a nail in my head in the last production we did together.
That was typecasting.
Dan, be careful.
I won't do that again.
Chuck would make a good nun.
Yes. No, but we're talking about doing another production. Some of you have been here long enough to remember the show Café Noir, which was a dinner theater. And we're thinking about doing it again, not as a dinner theater, but as a production. So that should be fun. It's about a bar. Shocking. Shocking. We have our own version here.
Maybe we should do it in the Ivy Lounge.
Ours not nearly big enough.
So when you think about the next few years, you think about doing the choir, the music here, many other things, acting. How about anything else?
Oh, wow. It's about all I can manage, actually. And I think, you know, as long as the singers and preparing the music, it's a lot of work to do all that. And I have some wonderful helpers who help me do the administrative part of it. And I think that I want to continue doing it as long as it feeds me. And I know that sounds selfish, but that's why I do almost everything I do. Because if it feeds me, I think it feeds others.
You do feed others, so thank you. So who has a burning question for our guests?
I would like to know if you and Dad are planning on having children.
How many are in the choir?
Well, not immediately.
We have an obstetrician here.
No charge. Well, I'll tell you, one of the problems of being married and getting married at this point is, this is what happens when you get married, they tell us, is that you gain weight. Well, we're gaining weight. And I proposed the other day that perhaps I was pregnant. But that's not happening.
Well, you have several theologians in the room.
We can start something new here.
Two things. Number one, I used to get asked, how do you make a marriage last long? We were married for 61 years, and I just say the days he doesn't like me, I sure as hell didn't like him either. That's one
Would you
thing, but
repeat what
if I understood initially, you said you get nervous when you're playing the organ, and then you majored in it. Why are you nervous? It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing all those gifts that you have.
Well, thank you. I don't know, I took a course once called, I don't remember the exact title, but it had to do with overcoming stage fright. And, there are techniques for doing that. I had one teacher after college who helped me deal with some of that, but every time I sit down at a keyboard and have to play where people sit and listen, I get nervous. Nervous enough to not play well, and that's not good. Peter doesn't have that problem. He says he did.
Yeah, I had to overcome it.
He overcame, we should talk.
you want me to take it?
Yeah, please.
After COVID, you did a wonderful recital performance for us of music that you had written to to text. And I'm wondering when you're going to be sharing, if you have any plans to be sharing more of your compositions with us.
Well, I haven't had any plans to do that recently. When somebody is a composer, I've always said to the church where they work, I hope you like their music because you're going to hear it a lot. And so the question is, I don't want to oversell myself, but I don't know, I haven't written a lot of that. There are things that I wrote at other times, other than during the pandemic, that, I would be delighted to share with people.
Marilyn, I'm very interested in what you would say to music students, particularly organists, with decreasing populations of church attendance. Where's their future? How is the church going to turn around? And what would you say to, college students?
Wow. I guess I've often thought about this, and in my more cynical moments, I would say, don't do it. And yet, at the same time, I did it. And you can't deny what is in you. So when you find what is in you, do it, even though it may not be the most financially productive. You'll be a lot happier in life. And so that's what I would say to students. But in terms of the church and where it finds itself, I think this is temporary. And I don't know what's to come, but I do know that I have read and am reading books and writings about people who are doing new and different things about organized religion and churches. That gives me hope for the future. It's not going to look like what any of us came from, but in the long run, it will be better.
Hi, I just wanted to share a memory I have of you when you were playing the organ. I sat down in the windowsill and I watched your fingering and I thought, shh, her hands are in love with the keys. It was so beautiful, Marilyn, to see your respect and affection for the keys.
Thank you, thank you. Was it this organ, Vina? Was it this organ?
It was right there.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you something about this organ. If you don't love those keys, they don't love you back. It's what they call a tracker organ. The keys are very responsive. If you stray onto one when you don't mean to, it will play. And so you have to be very precise about what you do. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Marilyn, can you share with us a few further thoughts about the transition that you observed from the old church to the new? Is that only a theological transformation? Is it liturgical? Is it emotional? Say some more about that if you would.
Okay, Lyle, when you're talking about the transition from the old to the new, are you talking about now or?
Well, you spoke about you made reference to an experience that you had where you found that the hymnal no longer suited the religion that you were fascinated by or intrigued with. What was that transition about, from the former to the future?
It's from having an intimate knowledge of the hymnal. Some of you know that I was president of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. So I have some experience with a lot of hymnody in different denominations. What we see at our conferences is it's ecumenical. So you see hymnals from all these different churches, and the committees that put hymnals together come to these conferences and present their work. So what I began to see was how the churches that are beginning to work on their hymnals, which happens all the time, but in the Episcopal Church we seem to thrive on having a hymnal that's very old. We had a hymnal from 1940 that served us until the next one came out in 1982. And we haven't had one since. Now we've had supplements which I have been part of creating. And so we did a lot of searching for new texts all over the world. And the transition is partly theological, but it's also language. It's one thing to live with these and thous and so forth, which is wonderful. Many of us understand that and thrive on that. However, if you're wanting to bring other people unchurched into the church, that's going to seem very foreign. And to give that up, some people feel that that's just totally wrong. And yet, what I'm seeing from other denominations and from what's beginning to happen in the Episcopal Church is that this has to change. So it's partly language, it's partly theological, because there has been biblical scholarship that has happened since the late 1980s that tell us all different kinds of things about not only history, but how it is now perceived in relationship to our own understanding of what Scripture means. And there are poets and hymn writers and authors who have written about this, and to ignore that is at our peril, I believe.
What I see in our society is, just in our lifetimes, a move away from group singing in general to the expectation that singing is a spectator sport.
Right.
I hear you countering that,
But I'd like to think, we go to church with family members, and in their churches, it's a rock band.
Yeah.
And when there is something that might be construed as a group singing thing, there's instrumental stuff in the background and somebody on stage singing the lyrics that are on the wall in large letters, like way back in our parents' time. The people in the congregation, if they're moving their mouths at all, are just doing that. Do you really see a change in that coming?
Yes, I do. It had better.
Can you repeat her question?
Yeah, her question had to do with how the group singing publicly has declined. I don't know how many of you used to go on car trips and you sang something, the whole family sang in the car. I don't know if that happens nowadays. I suspect it doesn't much. I think it does in some families. But in terms of even singing the national anthem at ball games, people don't do that. They have someone to sing, or booma chugga, and make something up out of it. And that's, it embarrasses me. It bothers me when you go into a church and everybody speaks the song. A psalm is a song. That's what that word means. But we don't sing it. And there is no substitute for group singing and what it feels like. That's why the Collington Singers is so important. What happens is there are people there who haven't sung since high school, there are people who haven't sung since elementary school, and there are people who have sung all over the place. What happens is as they're learning the music, they're listening to each other, and where they don't know what's happening, they're picking up from their neighbors. It's a group effort. It's not, you can't do this. It's like we're in this together and we're learning it together, and that's the power of group singing. And unfortunately, what Anne has alluded to is the churches in which there is a rock band, because that's supposed to bring the high school kids in. And they're singing their music in that style, but it's a performance. I've been to churches where there is that kind of group and the whole congregation is singing because someone has remembered that there is group singing that is of value. But it doesn't happen everywhere. So I don't know, we have to go through this adolescent period we've got going here and grow up. That's my opinion.
One of the things that intrigued me when first I watched you at St. Paul's in New York is leading people to sing by using the hand gesture to indicate the pitch.
Yeah.
And I wondered when you learned that and what inspired you to do that. It's a wonderful way to acquaint people who don't read music but can follow the idea of high and low that way.
Thank you. Yeah, Peter's talking about when I was at St. Paul's and I said we had to do some kind of music that people who just came in off the street could do. So I would sing something, and then when I would teach people, I should demonstrate this, and I don't have a song off the top of my head I can do it with, I would do this with it. Let's see, what could I do?
My country too.
Oh, yeah, okay. I do this with the singers, so they know. Okay, so I would sing, do, no, no, bis, pacem, pacem. Okay, and then I would do, listen and repeat after me. I would sing that, and then I would go, sing with me. I would do this. I wouldn't say anything. I'd simply do this, and then go, do, no, no, bis, pacem, pacem, and go on and on, okay? And so the thing of it is, I'm telling the people where the pitch is. They're watching my mouth for the words, okay? If they don't know the words particularly. And that way they learn it, and then they finish it and they say, I didn't even know that song. And you do it again, and you do this again, and they'll sing it. And if you stand in front of people as if you're in charge, that's key. As if you're in charge, they trust you. That's really scary because you better not betray them. Okay? So you have to communicate. I know what I'm doing. You will sing what I'm showing you. And they do. It's incredible.
And then you have a microphone that goes like this.
I did have a microphone in St. Paul's, and fortunately a wonderful engineer who would turn it off when it was time for the congregation to sing. Yeah.
And it's one way to get us to watch you.
That's true. She said that's one way to get the singers to watch me. I don't know if you've seen the cartoon of on the t-shirt, there's a skeleton standing at a music stand. He's saying, I'll wait for you to stop singing. Talking, sorry, I'll wait for you to stop talking.
I appreciate, okay, like this? I appreciated what you said about the value of congregational singing, because for so many years that's the only reason I went to church, was to get to sing a couple of good hymns. And my definition of good hymns, of course. And I generally, wherever I was going, I tuned out the choir because I didn't think they were worth listening to. You know, some screeching people up there with no interest to me. And I didn't listen to the sermons mostly. I just didn't pay much attention to it, except for when do we get to sing again. And I just loved it, and I needed it. It was a time when, it's the only time in your life you're singing. If you're not in school or in some chorus somewhere, you don't sing. Why would you do that? But I always felt so shallow about that, like all I really want to do is sing the hymns. And it was interesting that you valued that too.
Marilyn, thank you. You can turn it off.